Rumpole's Last Case. Picture, if you will, a typical domestic evening chez Rumpole in the mansion flat off the Gloucester Road. I am relaxed in a cardigan and slippers, a glass of Jack Pomeroy's very ordinary perched on the arm of my chair, a small cigar between my fingers, reading a brief, which, not unusually, was entitled Regina versus Timpson. She who must be obeyed was staring moodily at a small hearthrug, somewhat worn over the ages, I must admit, that lay in front of our roaring gas fire. The Timpsons carrying a shooter? I was shocked at what I had just read. Whatever's the world coming to? "We need a new one urgently," Hilda was saying. "And we need it now." She was still gazing at our hearthrug, scarred by the butt ends of the small cigars I was aiming at the bowl of water that stood in front of the fire. "It's like music in lifts, and wine in boxes." I was lamenting the decline of standards generally. "We'll be having Star Wars machines in Pomeroy's wine bar next. Decent, respectable criminals like the Timpsons never went tooled up." "Rumpole, you've done it again." Hilda recovered the end of my cigar from the rug and ground it ostentatiously out in an ashtray. As I told her, a bit of ash never did a carpet any harm. In fact, it improved the texture. "There's a perfectly decent little hearthrug going in Debenhams for £100, Hilda happened to mention. "Yes, going to someone who isn't balancing precariously on the rim of their overdraft," I said. "Rumpole, what on earth's the use of all these bank robberies and the rising crime rate they're always talking about, if we can't even get a decent little hearthrug out of it?" Hilda was clearly starting one of her campaigns, and I got up to recharge my glass from the bottle on the sideboard. "Remember what they're paying for legal aid cases nowadays," I told her firmly. "It hardly covers the fare to Temple Station. And there's Henry's 10% and the cost of a new briefcase." "You're never buying a new briefcase?" She was astonished. No, of course not. Can't afford it." I took a quick, sustaining gulp and carried the glass back to my armchair. "And there's a small claret at Pomeroy's to recover from the terrors of the day." "That's your trouble, isn't it, Rumpole?" She looked at me severely. "If it weren't for the small claret at Pomeroy's, we'd have no trouble buying a nice new hearthrug. And if it weren't for those awful roots of yours, we shouldn't need one anyway. I warn you, I shall call in at Debenhams tomorrow. It's up to you to deal with the bank." "Oh, how do you suggest I deal with the bank?" I asked her. "Tunnel in through the drains and rob the safe?" Not carrying a shooter, though. A Timpson carrying a shooter! It's the end of civilization as we know it. And I carried on with studying the brief prepared for me by dear old Bernard, Timpson's regular solicitor. It read as follows: "Counsel is briefed for Mr. Dennis Timpson. He will know the Timpson family of old." Indeed I do. "It appears that Mr. Dennis Timpson and his cousin Cyril Timpson entered the premises of the Pennywise Bank in Tooting by masquerading as workers from British Telecom, inspecting underground cables that were laid in Abraham Avenue. Whilst working underground, the two defendants contrived to burrow into the strong room of the Pennywise and open the safe, abstracting therefrom a certain quantity of cash and valuables. As they were doing so, they were surprised by Mr. Huggins, a middle-aged bank guard. It is clear from the evidence that Huggins was shot and wounded by a revolver, which was then left at the scene of the crime. The alarm had been given, and the two Timpson cousins were arrested by police officers who arrived at the scene of the crime. Mr. Dennis Timpson admits the break-in and the theft. He says, however, that he had no idea that his cousin Cyril was carrying a shooter, and is profoundly shocked at such behavior in a member of the family. He is most anxious to avoid the 14 years, which he believes would be the sentence if the jury took the view he was party to the wounding of Mr. Huggins. Cousin Cyril Timpson, who, instructing solicitors understand, is represented by Mrs. Phillida Erskine-Brown, Q.C., as Silk, with Mr. Claude Erskine-Brown as her learned junior, will, it seems likely, say that it is all down to our client, Dennis Timpson. He has told the police, Detective Inspector Broom, that he had no idea Dennis came to the scene tooled up, and that he was horrified when Dennis shot the bank guard. It seems clear to those instructing that Cyril is also anxious to avoid the 14 at all costs. Counsel is instructed to appear for Mr. Dennis Timpson at the Old Bailey and secure his acquittal on the charges relating to the firearm. Those instructing respectfully wish learned counsel the best of British luck. Ha ha, dear old Bernard! The Timpsons' regular solicitor was a great one for the inverted comma. He had put the matter clearly enough in his instructions with my brief in Regina versus Timpson, and the case, as he described it, had several points of interest as well as a major worry. The fly in the ointment of our case had been accurately spotted by the astute and experienced Bernard. In a cutthroat defence, two prisoners at the bar blame each other. The prosecutor invariably weighs in with tidbits of information designed to help the mutual mayhem of the two defendants, and the jury pot them both. The prospects were not made brighter by the fact that His Honour Judge Bullingham was selected to preside over this carnage. On top of all this anxiety, I was expecting my overdraft, already bursting at the seams, constructed for it by Mr. Truscott of the Caring Bank, to be swollen by Hilda's extravagant purchase of a new strip of floor covering. And then an event occurred which set me on the road to fortune, and so enabled me to call this particular account Rumpole's Last Case. My luck began when I called in at the clerk's room on the first morning of Regina versus Timpson, and found, as usual, Uncle Tom getting a chip shot into the waste-paper basket, Diane brewing up coffee, and Henry greeting me with congratulations such as I had never received from him after my most dramatic wins in court. Barristers, according to Henry, don't win or lose cases, they just do them, and he collects his 10%. "Well done indeed, Mr. Rumpole," he said. "You remember investing in the barrister's clerk sweepstake on the Derby?" In fact, I remembered his twisting my arm to part with £2, much better spent over the bar at Pomeroy's. You drew that Diogenes," Henry told me. "I drew what?" "Diogenes, Rumpole," Uncle Tom translated from the original Greek. "Do you know anything about the turf? It came in at a canter. I said to myself, that's old Rumpole for you, he has all the luck." "Oh, got a winner, did I?" I tried to remain cool when Henry handed me a bundle and told me it was 100 of the best, and asked if I wanted to count them. I told him I trusted him implicitly, and counted off 20 crisp fivers. It was an excellent start to the day. "You know what they say," Uncle Tom looked on with interest and envy. "Lucky on the GGs, unlucky in love. You've never been tremendously lucky in love, have you, Rumpole?" "Oh, I don't know, Uncle Tom. I've had my moments." 100 smackers. I put the loot away in my hip pocket. It's not every day that a barrister gets folding money out of his clerk." Uncle Tom looked at me a little sceptically. Perhaps he wondered what sort of moments I had had. After all, he had enjoyed the privilege of meeting Mrs. Hilda Rumpole at our chambers parties. As I sat in the cafe, I said to myself, they may talk as they please about what they call pelf. They may sneer as they like about eating and drinking, but I cannot help it. I cannot help thinking how pleasant it is to have money. Hey-ho, how pleasant it is to have money. So pleasant it is to have money. The lines went through my head as I took my usual walk down Fleet Street to Ludgate Circus and then up to the Old Bailey. As I walked, I could feel the comforting and unusual bulge of notes in my hip pocket. As I marched up the back lanes to the Palais de Justice, I passed a newspaper kiosk, which I had previously noticed seemed to mainly cater to the racing fraternity. There were a number of papers and posters showing jockeys whose memoirs were printed and horses whose exploits were described, and I noticed that morning the advertisement for a publication entitled The Punter's Guide to the Turf, which carried a story headed, 4-horse winner, father of 3, tells how he hit $250,000 jackpot. Naturally, as a successful racing man, a status I had achieved in the last 10 minutes, I took a greater interest in the familiar kiosk. I had clearly something of a talent for the turf. The Derby one day, perhaps the Grand National the next. Was it the Grand National or the Oaks? With a few winners, I thought a fellow could live pretty high on the hog. I took a final turning in the Old Bailey Hove interview. A fellow might even be able to consider giving up the delights of slogging down the Bailey for the dubious pleasure of doing a cutthroat defence before his unpredictable honour Judge Roger Bullingham. And then, walking on towards the old verdict factory, I heard the familiar voices of Phillida Erskine-Brown, Q.C., and her spouse. Fragments of conversation floated back to me on the wind. "Rumpole's got Probert taking a note for him," our Portia said. "Do try not to dream about taking her to the opera again, Claude." "I took her only once, Philly, and then she didn't enjoy it." This was Claude's somewhat half-hearted defence. "I'll bet she didn't. You would have been better off inviting her to a folk festival at the Croydon Community Centre. Much more her style." "Oh, Philly, look, aren't you ever going to forget it?" "Well, frankly, Claude, I don't think I ever am." They crossed the road in front of me, and their voices were lost. But I had heard enough to know that all was not sweetness and light in the Erskine-Brown household. I hoped that our Portia's natural irritation with her errant husband would not lead her to sharpen her scalpel for the cutthroat defence. Half an hour later, I knew the answer to that question. I was robed up with Liz Probert and Mr. Bernard in tow on my way to a pre-trial conference with my client Dennis Timpson, when we met Phillida Erskine-Brown and her husband on a similar mission to Den's cousin Cyril. "Ill met by moonlight, proud Titania." I thought this was a suitable greeting to the Lady Silk in the lift. "Rumpole, what's all this about proud Titania?" "You're not going to listen to me?" "Oh, I'll certainly listen, Rumpole. What have you got to say?" "Look, you know it's always fatal when two accused persons start blaming each other. A cutthroat defence with the prosecutor chortling in his joy and handing out the razors. Now that's got to be avoided at all costs." "Well, why don't you admit it, then?" "Admit what?" "Admit you had the shooter. Accept the facts." "Ha! Plead guilty?" I must admit I was hurt by the suggestion. "And break the habit of a lifetime?" We were out of the lift now and waiting at the gateway of the cells in the basement for a fat and panting screw who had just put down a jumbo-sized sandwich to unlock the oubliette. "Who's prosecuting?" I asked Phillida. "A young fellow who's in our chambers for about 5 minutes," she told me. "Charles Hearthstoke." "Oh, my life seems to be dominated by hearthrugs," I told her. "Oh, he's rather sweet." If you can possibly think hearthrugs sweet, I must say I was astonished. No wonder you suspect Dennis Timpson of carrying a shooter. Dennis Timpson was tooled up. She was positive of the fact. Cyril was. I knew my Dennis. Moreover, he shot the bank guard extremely inefficiently in the foot. Oh, come on, proud Titania, plead guilty. I tried a winsome smile to a minus effect. Not for thy fairy kingdom, Rumpole. What do you mean? Well, isn't that what Titania tells him at the end of the scene? I suppose it means no deal. We parted then to interview our separate clients, and I was left wondering if when she was a white wig I had not taught young Phillida Trant, as she then was, far too much. We, that is to say Liz, Mr. Bernard and I, found Dennis in one of the small interview rooms smoking a little snout and reading The Punter's Guide to the Turf. I thought I should do best by an appeal to our old friendship and business association. You and I, Dennis, I reminded him, have known each other for a large number of years, and I've never heard of you carrying a shooter before. You're a sporting man, Mr. Rumpole, the client said unexpectedly. I had to admit that I had enjoyed some recent success on the turf. Yeah, bloke in here cleared $250,000 on the horses, and Dennis was good enough to show me his punter's guide. Well, I told him I've had handsome wins in my time, but nothing to equal. Yeah, he's seen boarding an aeroplane for the Seychelles. Dennis showed me the picture in his punter's guide. The Seychelles, eh? I was thoughtful. Far from Judge Bullingham and the Old Bailey. Yeah, I could make more than that on a 4-horse accumulator. If I had a ton, our client claimed. A ton of what? £100. £100 stake. £100? That very sum was swelling in my back pocket. Yeah, I reckon I can top 300 grand in the next few days. I pulled myself together and reluctantly came back to the matter in hand. You know what's going to happen when you and Cyril blame each other for carrying the shooter. The mad bull is going to tell the jury you agreed to go on an armed robbery together. He'll say that it doesn't really matter who was in charge of the equipment. You are both guilty. Now, did you say £300,000? Yeah, from my 4-horse accumulator. Dennis made the point again. 4-horse what? Accumulator. He consulted his paper again. I could get 9-1 about Pretty Balloon at Goodwood this afternoon. Do you want me to take this down? Ms. Probert was puzzled at the course the conference was taking. I told her to relax, but I pulled out a pencil and made a few notes on the back of my brief. I am ashamed to have to tell you that they were not about the case. So, that'd be £1,000 to go on Mother's Ruin at Redcar. 5-1, I reckon. That'd give us 6 thou. Dennis went on as though it were peanuts. And that'd be on Ever So Grateful, which should get you 4s at Yarmouth. So that's 30 grand. Ever So Grateful, I noted. Sounds a polite little animal. Now, we need 10-1 for a bit of a gamble. Dennis was studying the forecasts. Well, what's it been up to now? Oh, doddle, he told me calmly. Easy as tunnelling into a bank vault. I couldn't help it. Oh, do me a favour, Mr. Rumpole. Don't bring that up again. His pained expression didn't last long. And there it is. Kissogram. At Newbury on Wednesday, he read out in triumph. Anti-post price should bring you, let's say, 330 grand. Give or take a fiver. In round figures? Oh, yeah, in round figures. I put away my pen and looked at Dennis. Now, just tell me one thing. About the shooter. His cheerfulness was gone. No, we'll come back to the shooter in a minute. I was thinking that you've been in custody since that eventful night. 6 months, Mr. Rumpole, Bernard told me, and Liz Probert added, we should get that off the sentence. I suppose, I said, being in Brixton and now here, it's difficult to place a small bet or two. Not to mention a 4-horse accumulator. Oh, bless your heart, Mr. Rumpole. No, there's always screws that'll do it for you, even down the Old Bailey cells. Screws that'll put on bets? I was surprised to hear it. You know Gerald, a fat one at the gate, the one that's always got his face in a bacon sarnie? Gerald. I was grateful for the information. And then I stood up. We seemed to have covered all the vital points. Well, I think that's about all on the legal aspect of the case. Now just remember one thing, Dennis. The Timpsons don't carry weapons, and they don't grass on each other. That's true, Mr. Rumpole. That has always been our point of honour. So don't you go jumping into the witness box and blame it all on your cousin Cyril. Let the prosecution try and prove which of you had the gun. Now don't you two start cutting each other's throats. Cyril goes in the first, doesn't he? Dennis had a certain amount of legal knowledge gained in the hard school of experience. If he goes in at all, yes. You're second on the indictment. Well, I'll have to see what he says, won't I? But you wouldn't grass on him? Well, not unless I have to. Dennis didn't sound so sure. What is honour? A word. What is that word, honour? Air. Happily, the illusion was lost on my client, so I went off to try a few passes at the Mad Bull, after a word in confidence with the stout warder at the gate. Gerald. I accosted him, after I'd told Liz and Mr. Bernard to go on up and keep my place warm in court. Yes, Mr. Rumpole. Got a busy day in court ahead, have you? The man's voice came muffled by a large wadge of sandwich. I'm a little hard-pressed. In fact, I'm too busy to get to my usual bookmakers. Want me to put on something for you, do you? Gerald seemed to follow my drift at once. Yes, £100. 4-horse accumulator. Start this afternoon at Goodwood. I consulted the notes on my brief. With, pretty balloon. I reckon you can get 9 to 1 about it. Will do, Mr. Rumpole. I'll be slipping out soon for a spot of dinner. Oh, I'm sure you'll need it. I looked at the man with something akin to awe, and gave him the name of my 4 hopeful horses. Then I put my hand in my back pocket, lugged out the £100, and handed it all to Gerald. As some old gambler put it, he either fears his fate too much, or his deserts are small, that puts it not unto the touch to win or lose it all. It was after I'd placed the great wager with Gerald that I went upstairs. Outside Judge Bullingham's court I found 3 large figures awaiting me. I recognized Fred Timpson, a grey-haired man, his face bronzed by the suns of Marbella, wearing a discreet sports jacket, cavalry-twilled trousers, and an MCC tie. He was the acknowledged head of the family, always called on for advice in times of trouble, and with him I had also a long-standing business relationship. Fred was flanked by 2 substantial ladies who had clearly both been for a recent tint and set at the hairdresser's. They were brightly dressed, as though for a wedding or some celebration other than their husband's day in court. They, as I was reminded, were Den's Doris and Cyril's Maureen. Fred hastily told me of the family troubles. "We're being made a laughing-stock, Mr. Rumpole. There's Malloys making a joke of this all over South London." Of course I knew the numerous Clan Malloy, rival and perhaps more deft and successful villains, who were to the Timpsons what the Montagues were to the Capulets, York to Lancaster, or the Guelphs to the Ghibellines of old. I've been called out to in the street by Malloy women, Dens Doris complained. Maureen's been called out to in Tesco's on several occasions. These Malloys aren't ever going to let us hear the last of it. Fred was gloomy. Young Peanuts Malloy. He called out that all the Timpsons is good for is to use as ferrets. Ferrets? I looked at him with some interest. Why on earth should he say that, I wonder? Oh, you know the way they talk. Fred was full of contempt for Malloy boasting. We want you to go in there, Mr. Rumpole, and save our reputation. Well, I'll do my best, I had to promise. After all, the Timpson family had done more for the legal profession than 100 Lord Chancellors. A standard opening gambit, when faced with the difficulties of a cutthroat defence, is to apply to the court before the jury is let in and sworn for separate trials for the defendants. If they are tried on different occasions, they cannot then give evidence which will be harmful to each other. Such applications are usually doomed, as the judge is as keen as the prosecution to see a couple of customers convicting each other without the need for outside assistance. A separate trial, the bull growled when I stood on my feet to make the application, for Dennis Timpson. Any reason for that, Mr. Rumpole, apart from your natural desire to spin out these proceedings as long as possible? I assume your client's on legal aid. I'm sorry to say that not only the handsome young Hearthstoke, but Phillida laughed at Bullingham's joke, and I thought that if I were to win the 4-horse accumulator, I could tell his lordship to shut up and not be so mercenary. The reason, my lord, I told him, is my natural desire to see that justice is done to my client. Gazing at his lordship, I knew how the Emperor Nero looked when he settled down in the circus to watch a gladiator locked in hopeless combat with a saber-toothed tiger. I glanced away, and happened to catch sight of a pale, weaselly-faced young man with lank hair and a leather jacket leaning over the rail of the public gallery, listening to the proceedings with interest and amusement. I immediately recognized the face, well known in criminal circles, of Peanuts Malloy, who also appeared to enjoy the circus. I averted my eyes and once more addressed the learned judge. I don't want my client sent down on evidence which may well be quite unreliable. At that I sat down in as challenging a manner as possible, and His Honour, Judge Bullingham, directed a sickly smile at Phillida. Mrs. Erskine-Brown, do you support Mr. Rumpole's application? He asked her in a voice like Guinness and treacle. My lord, I do not. Phillida rose to put her small stiletto heel into Rumpole. I am sure that under your lordship's wise guidance justice will be done to both the defendants. Your lordship will no doubt direct the jury with your lordship's usual clarity. When it came to buttering up the bull, our Portia could lay it on with a trowel. You may well warn them of the danger of convicting Mr. Dennis Timpson on the evidence of an accomplice. Oh, but of course, they can do so if they think it right. Oh, yes, Mrs. Erskine-Brown. The bull was purring like a kitten. I shall certainly tell them that. The court is grateful for your most valuable contribution. So the two Timpsons were ordered to be tried together, and I thought that if only certain horses managed their races better than I was managing my case, I might, in the not-too-distant future, be boarding an aeroplane for the Seychelles. In fact, that first day in court was not an unmitigated disaster. As Hearthrug was drawing to the end of a distinctly unsporting address to the jury, in the course of which he told them that the bank guard, Huggins, A family man, a man of impeccable character, who has sat upon his local church council, was wounded by these two desperate robbers, albeit in the foot. My client scribbled a note which was delivered to me by a helpful usher. I opened it and read the glad tidings. The screws told me Mr. Rumpole, pretty balloon, won by a short head at Goodwood. One up, I thought, as I crumpled the note and looked up at Bullingham like a man who might not be in his clutches forever. 1 up, and 3 to go. I have it on the good authority of Harry Shrimpton, the court clerk, that after he rose, Bullingham said to him, "Really most attractive advocate, Mrs. Erskine Brown. Do you think it would be entirely inappropriate if I sent down a box of chocolates?" "Yes, Judge," Shrimpton felt it his duty to tell him. "You mean, yes, I can?" "No, I mean yes, it would be entirely inappropriate." "She hasn't a sweet tooth." The bull was puzzled. "The Lord Chancellor wouldn't like it." The court clerk was expert on such matters, but the judge merely growled, "Well, I wasn't going to send chocolates to the Lord Chancellor." Whilst the learned female Q.C. was being threatened by unsolicited chocolates from the judge, she was sitting with Charlie Hearthstoke in a quiet corner of Pomeroy's wine bar in the company of 2 glasses and a gold paper-necked bottle in an ice-bucket. Charlie Hearthstoke told Phillida what a superb courtroom technician she was. The way you handled Bullingham was superb. He's dotty about you, naturally. Well, can't blame him. I suppose everyone is. There was more of such flattery, apparently, and Hearthstoke made it clear that he wished he'd got to know Phillida better when he was in our chambers. But, of course, he was always doing such important cases and was very much married, naturally. "Oh, not all that married," Phillida now agrees, she replied. "And who knows what course the conversation might not have taken had I not hove to with Liz Probert, seen the bottle in the bucket, and asked Jack Pomeroy's girl, Barbara, to bring us another couple of glasses. 'Oh, champagne all round, eh, Hearthrug?' I said, as we settled in our places. 'And I know exactly what you're celebrating.' 'I can't imagine what that could be.' Phillida tried to sound innocent. 'Oh, come off it,' I told her. 'You're celebrating the unholy alliance between Cyril Timpson and the prosecution, with a full exchange of information designed to send my poor old Dennis away for at least 14 years. That's not fair.' 'Of course it's not fair, Portia, but it's true. And as the quality of mercy doesn't seem to be dropping like the gentle rain from heaven around here, we'll have to make do with Pomeroy's bubbly.' I pulled the bottle out of the bucket and looked at it with dismay. Méthode champenoise. Oh, Hearthrug, you disappoint me." "Actually, Charles, it's quite delicious." I saw Phillida smile at the odious prosecutor. "Grape juice and gas," I warned her. "Wait for the headache." You know Miss Probert, of course." Of course she knew Liz only too well, but I wasn't in a mood to make life easy for Cyril Timpson's silk. "Of course," Phillida spoke from the deep freeze. Gazing idly about me, I saw Claude enter Pomeroy's. I happened to tell his wife that he looked as though he'd lost her, a remark not lost on the egregious Hearthrug. "Oh, Rumpole, do lay off!" Phillida's aside was unusually angry. "Are you going to lay off Dennis?" I said. I was prepared to strike a bargain with her, but as she made no response, I invited Erskine Brown to draw up a chair and sit next to Miss Probert. He declined to do this, but squeezed himself in a way welcomed by neither of the parties between his wife and Hearthstoke. When we were all more or less uncomfortably settled, I asked Claude if I could borrow the copy of the Standard, which he was holding much as a drowning man clings to a raft. "I went back to chambers, Philly," the unhappy man was saying. They said you hadn't been in." "No, I came straight here. I was discussing the case with prosecuting counsel." "Oh, yes." Erskine Brown was clearly cowed. "Oh, yes, of course." I wasn't listening to them. I was gazing like a man entranced at a stop-press item on the back of the Standard. The golden words read, "Late result from red car, number 1, mother's ruin. 2 down, and 2 to go." Things were going so well that I suggested to Hearthrug he might order a bottle of the real stuff. "Why, what are you celebrating?" Phillida asked. "I don't know about you fellas," I told her, "but I've made a few investments which seem to have turned out rather well. In fact, my future is almost entirely secure. Perhaps I won't have to do this job anymore." I looked round the table, smiling. "Suppose this should turn out to be Rumpole's positively last case, At which point my learned friends and one of my learned enemies looked at me with a wild surmise, silent at a table in Pomeroy's wine bar, faced with what might well count as the most significant moment in recent legal history. Events were moving quickly. Diogenes had won the Derby the previous Wednesday, and on Monday morning Henry had paid out my little bit of capital when I called into chambers on my way to participate in Regina versus Timpson. By Monday night, 2 of my favourite horses had brought home the bacon, Pretty Balloon at Goodwood and Mother's Ruin more recently at Redcar. The speed of my success had somewhat stunned me, but I began to feel, as anyone must halfway through a successful 4-horse accumulator, that I had the Midas touch. I had listened to Dennis's advice, perhaps, but I could certainly pick them. As I settled in my armchair at the gas fireside in the Gloucester Road area that Monday evening, I had no real doubt that Hilda and I were bound for some easy retirement by a sun-kissed lagoon. We should soon, I thought, be boarding an aeroplane for the Seychelles. "I've got it, Rumpole," she broke into my reverie. "What have you got, Hilda?" "What I've been wanting for a long time. That little hearthrug. Oh, it looks smart, doesn't it?" "If that's what you've always wanted, I think you might be rather more ambitious." The new arrival at our mansion flat seemed hardly appropriate to our newfound wealth. "Just don't you dare throw your cigar ends at it." "Don't you worry," I told her. "I shall be chucking my cigar ends, my Havana cigar ends, my Romeo y Julieta cigar ends, at the sparkling ocean, as I wander barefoot along the beach in a pair of old white ducks, and knock the sweet oysters off the rocks." "Oh, you'll hardly be doing that in the Gloucester Road." Hilda seemed not to be following my drift. "Forget the Gloucester Road, Hilda. We'll move somewhere far away from Gloucester Road and the Old Bailey." I rose to get a glass of Chateau Fleet Street from the bottle on the sideboard. "It's not real Persian, of course, but I think it's the traditional pattern," Hilda told me. In return, I gave her a taste of the Lotus Eaters. "Courage," he said, and pointed toward the land. "This mounting wave will roll us shoreward soon." And in the afternoon they came unto a land in which it seemed always afternoon. All round the coast the languid air did swoon, breathing like one that hath a weary dream. "I have absolutely no idea what you mean," Hilda sighed, and turned her attention to the Daily Telegraph. "It's not the meaning, Hilda, it's the sound we shall hear. The chatter of monkeys, the screech of parrots in the jungle, The hum of dragonflies, the rattle of grasshoppers rubbing their dear little legs together, the boom of breakers on the coral reef. And we shall sit out on the hotel veranda, drinking planters' punch, and never having to wear a bloody winged collar again. I don't wear a winged collar now. Hilda tends to think first of herself. And then she said, as I thought a little sharply, I wonder if the bank manager will have anything to say about the hearthrug. Hardly, Hilda, I reassured her. I rather suspect that when I next run into Mr. Truscott of the Caring Bank, he'll be inviting me for a light lunch at the Savoy Grill. I just hope I can make time for him. The bank manager inviting you to lunch? That'll be the day. She suddenly looked at me. You have got the £100 for a hearthrug, haven't you, Rumpole? Fear not, Hilda. I do expect return of thrice 3 times the value of this bond. That's all very well, but have you got the £100? When I rose to cross-examine Inspector Broom, the officer in charge of the case, a glance up at the public gallery told me that Peanuts Molloy was still in situ and apparently enjoying the proceedings. My gaze lingered on him for but a moment, and then I turned my attention to the inspector, as I had done over so many cases, and confronted a middle-aged, somewhat sardonic man who was capable of rare moments of humour and even rarer moments of humanity. He looked back at me, as always, with a sort of weary patience. Defence barristers in general, and Horace Rumpole in particular, were not among the inspector's favourite characters. Inspector Broom, I began my cross-examination. I understand that no fingerprints were found on the gun, at which point the bull couldn't resist weighing in with, I imagine, Mr. Rumpole, that these gentry would be too... For a wild moment I hoped he was going to say experienced, and then I'd have him on toast in the Court of Appeal. But his dread of that unjust tribunal made him say, too intelligent to leave fingerprints. Something, perhaps it was the success I was enjoying with the horses, emboldened me to protest at the judge's constant interruptions at the expense of my client. My lord, I ventured to point out, the prosecution in this case is in the hands of my learned friend Mr. Hearthrug. Hearthstoke. The young gentleman in question rose to correct me. I'll beg his pardon, Hearthstone. I'm sure he needs no assistance from your lordship. There was the usual pause, while the bull lowered his head, snorted, pawed the ground, and so on. Then he charged in with, Mr. Rumpole, that was an outrageous remark. It is one I may have to consider reporting as professional misconduct. Of course, by the time he did that, I might be safely on my way to the Seychelles. But I still had to get through Yarmouth that day and Newbury the next. I thought it best to return the retort courteous. Oh, I'm sorry if anything I might have said could possibly be construed as critical of your lordship. Very well. Let's get on with it. Bullingham suspended his attack for the moment, and I returned to the witness. Were the other areas of the strong room examined for fingerprints? In particular, the safe? Yes, they were, the inspector told me. And again, no fingerprints of either Mr. Cyril or Mr. Dennis Timpson were found. Bullingham roused himself to interrupt again, so I went on quickly. My lord is about to say, of course, that they'd still be wearing their gloves when they opened the safe, and that is a perfectly fair point. I needn't trouble your lordship to make that interjection. "Isn't Rumpole rather going over the top?" I heard Phillida whispering to her husband, and she got the sensible reply, "He's behaving like a chap who's got a secure future from investments." "No fingerprints identifiable as the defendants were found, my lord, that is true," Broom told the court. But no doubt a number of fingerprints were found on the door of the safe?" I asked. "Of course." "And they were photographed?" "Yes." "And no doubt many of them came from bank employees?" "No doubt about that, my lord." "But did you take the trouble to check any of those fingerprints with criminal records?" "Well, why should we have done that?" The inspector looked somewhat pained at the suggestion. "To see if they corresponded to the fingerprints of any known criminal other than the two Mr. Timpsons." No, we didn't." "Well, why not?" "The two Mr. Timpsons were the only men we found at the scene of the crime, and we had established that they were wearing gloves." "Because they had gloves on when you caught them," Bullingham explained to me as though I were a child, for the benefit of the jury. We are so much obliged to the learned judge for his most helpful interjection, aren't we, Inspector? Otherwise you might have had to think of the answer for yourself." Oh, of course, that brought the usual warning rumble from the bench, but I pressed on more or less regardless with them. "Let me ask you something else, Inspector. When the defendants were apprehended, they were carrying about £3,000 worth of cash and other valuables from various deposit boxes?" "That is so." "Was that the total amount missing from the safe?" No. No, as a matter of fact, it wasn't." For the first time, Broom sounded puzzled. That particular safe had been almost entirely emptied when we came to inspect it." "Were its entire contents valued at something over £60,000? Well over that, my lord." "Well over that." The judge made a grateful note. "You have no idea when the £60,000 worth was taken?" I heard Bullingham start with a menacing "perhaps," and went on immediately. "My lord is about to say that perhaps they took it first and carried it out by the tunnel. That would be a sound point for my lord to make." "Oh, thank you, Mr. Rumpole," the judge tried to retort, ironical. "Not at all, my lord. I'm only too glad to be of assistance." I smiled at him charmingly. "But let me ask you this, Inspector. Your men came to the bank because an alarm went off in the strong room?" That is so. The signal was received at Tooting Central at, about 3 a.m. Yes, we know that. But it's clear, isn't it, that when your men invaded the bank, they knew nothing about the tunnel?" That is quite right." So they were admitted by the second guard on duty and went down to the vaults?" "Yes." "No police officer ever entered by the tunnel?" "Not so far as I'm aware." "We all heard that evidence, Mr. Rumpole, or perhaps you weren't listening." There's nothing subtle, you see, about Judge Bullingham's little sallies. No, on the contrary, my lord, I was listening most intently. I turned back to the inspector. "And when your officers entered the vaults, they found there 2 men running down a passage towards them?" "That's what they reported." "Running away from the entrance to the tunnel?" Yes, indeed." "That's all I have to ask." I gave Bullingham another of my smiles. "Unless your lordship wishes to correct any of those answers." "Hadn't you better sit down, Mr. Rumpole?" Sit down? Yes, of course, I'd be glad to. Your lordship is most kind and considerate, as always." As I sat down, I thought that my third horse, ever so grateful, had better get a spurt on, or I'd find myself up on a charge of professional misconduct. These thoughts were interrupted by Charlie Hearthstoke's re-examination of the witness. Mr. Rumpole has asked if you consulted criminal records on any of the fingerprints you did find on the safe. Yes, I remember him asking me that, Broom answered. Oh, Mr. Rumpole no doubt felt that he had to ask a large number of questions in order to justify his fee from the legal aid. Bullingham did one of his usual jokes to the jury. It was a moderate success only, with the 12 honest citizens. I suppose you could compare the photographs of fingerprints you have with criminal records, couldn't you? Hearthstoke suggested, greatly to my relief. I could, my lord, if the court wishes it. Inspector Broom turned politely to the bench for guidance, and the judge did his best to sound judicial. Mr. Hearthstoke made a very fair suggestion, Inspector, as one would expect of a totally impartial prosecutor, he said graciously. Perhaps you'd be so kind as to make the inquiry. We don't want to give Mr. Rumpole any legitimate cause for complaint. When we left court at lunchtime, I followed the inspector down the corridor in pursuit of the line of defence I had decided to adopt for Dennis Timpson. When I caught up with him, I ventured to tell Inspector New Broom what a thoroughly dependable and straightforward officer I had always found him. Quite rightly, he suspected that I wanted something out of him. He asked me precisely what I had in my mind. A small favour, I suggested. Why should I do you a favour, Mr. Rumpole? You've been a bit of a thorn in my flesh over the years, if I have to be honest. Oh, yes, you have to be honest. But if I promised never to be a thorn in your flesh ever again, Oh, not making me and my officers look Charlies in front of the jury? Broom asked suspiciously. Never again. Not letting the Timpsons get away with murder? Oh, come, Inspector, never murder. Perhaps occasionally stolen fish. Not getting my young DCs tied up in their own notebooks? He pressed for specific assurances. If I swore, I said, on my old wig never to do anything of the sort again. In fact, Inspector Broom, if I were to promise you that this would be positively my last case. Your last case, Mr. Rumpole? The inspector was clearly reluctant to believe his ears. My positively last case. You'd be leaving the Bailey after this for good? Hope sprang in the officer's breast. I was thinking in terms of a warmer climate. So if I were to leave and never trouble you again, then I suppose I might be more inclined to help out, Inspector Broom conceded. But if it's that fingerprint business, you won't get anything out of that. I just wanted to get somebody worried. No respectable thief's ever going to leave their prints on a Peter. No. What I was going to suggest, old darling, is something entirely different. Nothing illegal, of course. Illegal? Ask Detective Inspector Broom to do anything illegal? I hope I sounded suitably appalled at the idea. Certainly not. This is only guaranteed to serve the interests of justice. After lunch, and after I had made my most respectful suggestions to the inspector, Hearthstoke closed the prosecution case, and Phillida called Cyril Timpson to the witness box. He agreed with most of the prosecution case, and accepted the evidence which we had heard, of Mr. Huggins of having been shot at by some person and wounded in the foot. Phillida held the revolver in her hand and asked in her most solemn tones, "Cyril Timpson, did you take this weapon with you when you tunneled into the Pennywise Bank?" When he had, not unexpectedly, answered, "No, I never," I whispered a request to her to sit down and resist the temptation of cutting Dennis's throat. She was not in a temptation-resisting mood. "Did you ever," she asked Cyril, "have any idea that your cousin, the co-defendant, Dennis Timpson, was armed with a pistol?" "Oh, my lord," I objected. "There is absolutely no evidence that Dennis was armed with anything." "The pistol was there at the scene of the crime, Mr. Rumpole. Someone must have brought it," Bullingham reasoned. "Someone, perhaps. But the question assumes—" "Please continue, Mrs. Erskine-Brown." The judge, ignoring me, almost simpered at Phillida. "You may ask your question." "But you don't have to, Portia," I whispered to her as I sat down. "Remember the quality of mercy." She promptly forgot it. "Did you have any idea that Dennis was armed?" she asked. "No idea at all." Cyril looked pained. "Thank you, Mr. Timpson. Just wait there." Phillida sat down, happily conscious of having done her worst, and I rose to cross-examine the witness. Bullingham sat back to enjoy further bloodshed. "Mr. Timpson, when you were removing some of the property from the safe, you suddenly ran out of the strong room into the corridor. Why was that?" "We thought we heard a noise behind us." Cyril frowned, as though he still found the situation puzzling. "Coming from where?" "He said behind us, Mr. Rumpole," Bullingham reminded me. "Thank you, your lordship, so much. And it was that sound that made you retreat?" "We thought we was being copped like." "Why didn't you retreat back into the tunnel you came from? Was it by any chance because the sound was coming from that direction?" Yes, it might have been," Cyril admitted. "When you ran out into that corridor, you were holding some boxes containing money and valuables." "Yes, I was." "And so was your cousin Dennis." "Yes." "You saw that?" "Yes." "You never saw him with a gun in his hand?" "No, I never saw it, but I knew I didn't have it." "Mr. Cyril Timpson, may I say at once that I accept the truth of that statement?" The court went strangely silent. Bullingham looked disappointed, as though I had announced that throat-cutting was off, and the afternoon would be devoted to Halma. Phillida whispered to me, "Rumpole, have you gone soft in your old age?" "No, not soft, Portia. I just thought it might be nice to win my last case," I whispered back. Then I spoke to the witness. "I agree that you didn't have the gun, and Dennis certainly didn't."
"Oh, so where did it come from, Mr. Rumpole?"
The judge gave me the retort, sarcastic.
"Did it drop from the sky?"
"Yes, my lord. In a manner of speaking, it did. Thank you, Mr. Cyril Timpson." I shot out of the Old Bailey, when Judge Bullingham rose at the end of that day like a bat leaving hell. That was not my usual manner of departure, but careful inquiry at the sporting kiosk in the alley off Ludgate Circus had led me to believe that the Punter's Guide, out late on Tuesday afternoon, carried a full printout of that very afternoon's results. If you can make one heap of all your winnings, and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, you'll have some idea of what I felt like as I hastened towards the newsstand and to what had rapidly become my favourite reading. Meanwhile, as Peanuts Malloy came out of the entrance of the public gallery, Detective Sergeant Garsington, an officer in plain clothes, peeled himself off a wall and followed at a discreet distance. When Peanuts mounted a bus going south of the river, the detective sergeant was also in attendance. This close watch on Peanuts' movement was something that the detective inspector had authorized on the understanding that I would be leaving the bar after the present case, and so would trouble the authorities no more. While Peanuts was off on his bus journey with Detective Sergeant Garsington in attendance, I was watching the elderly, partially blind lady with the bobble hat try to undo the newly arrived parcel of the Punter's Guide with swollen and arthritic fingers. At last I could bear it no longer. I seized the string and broke it for her. I fluttered the Punter's pages for the flyaway leaf of that afternoon's result. And there was the printout from Yarmouth. 1:30. First, ever so grateful. "Oh, my God," I said devoutedly as I paid the old lady. "Thanks most awfully." At about opening time, Peanuts Malloy was in a gym used to train young boxers over the Venerable Bede pub along the Old Kent Road. Peanuts was neither sparring nor skipping. He was reporting back to another deeply interested member of the Clan Malloy. What he said, as later recalled by Detective Sergeant Garsington, went something like this. "Well, like I tell you, no sweat. They're still just blaming it on each other. There's one old brief what thinks different, but the judge don't take a blind bit of notice, not of him. Ha ha!" At which point the detective sergeant intruded and asked, "Are you Peter James Malloy?" "What if I am?" said Peanuts. "I must ask you to accompany me. My inspector would like to ask you some questions." "Oh, yeah? What about?" "I believe," Detective Sergeant Garsington was suitably vague, "it's about a fingerprint." Wednesday morning passed as slowly as a discourse on the Christian attitude to tort from Soapy Sam Ballard, or an afternoon in a rain-soaked holiday hotel with She Who Must Be Obeyed. First of all, Judge Bullingham had some applications in another case to deal with, and so we started late. And then Phillida had some other evidence of a particularly unimportant nature to call. At last it was lunchtime, and I was ready for the final throw. This was the crunch, the crisis, the moment to win or lose it all. I couldn't get away to Newbury to cheer Kissogram on, but I had decided to do the next best thing. Discreet inquiries from the ushers at the Bailey had revealed the fact that there was a betting shop recently opened by Blackfriars Station. I found it a curious establishment with painted-over windows and only a few visitors, who looked to be of no particular occupation, watching the television at lunchtime. They were joined by an aging barrister in bands and a winged collar, who put a small cigar into his mouth but forgot to light it while watching the 1:30. I find it hard to recall my exact feelings while the race was going on, and I supposed I have had worse times waiting for juries to come back with a verdict. Somewhere in the depths of my being I felt that I had come so far that nothing could stop me now. Nor could it. Kissogram pulled it off by 3 lengths. I hurried back to the Bailey, repeating Dennis's magic figure. "Let's say 330 grand. Give or take a fiver." It was, of course, an extraordinary happening, and one which I intended to keep entirely to myself for the moment, or God only knew how many learned friends would remember old Rumpole and touch him for a loan. Uppermost in my mind was the opening speech I was due to make of Dennis Timpson's defence, when the bull full of the City of London's roast beef and claret returned to the seat of judgment. It would be the last time I opened a defence in my positively last case. Why should I not do what a barrister who has his future at the bar to think of can never do? Why should I not say exactly what I thought? As I took the lift up to the robing room, the idea appealed to me more and more. It became even more attractive than the prospect of wandering along palm-fringed beaches beside the booming surf, although, of course, I meant to do that as well. Phrases, heartfelt sentiments began to form in my mind. I was going to make the speech of a lifetime, Rumpole's last opening, and the bull would have to listen. So, at exactly 2:10, I rose to my feet, glanced up at the public gallery, found that Peanuts Malloy was no longer in his place, and began. Members of the jury, you heard the prosecution case opened by my learned friend Mr. Hearthstoke, and I wish now to make a few remarks of a general nature before calling Mr. Dennis Timpson into the witness box. I hope they will be helpful.
I hope so too, Mr. Rumpole. The defense doesn't have to indulge in opening speeches.
The judge was scarcely encouraging, but no power on earth was going to stop me now. Members of the jury, you have no doubt heard of the presumption of innocence, the golden thread that runs through British justice. Everyone in this fair land of ours is presumed to be innocent until they're proved to be guilty. But against this presumption there is another mighty legal doctrine, I told them. It is known as the Bullingham factor. Everyone who is put into that dock before this particular learned judge is naturally assumed to have done the deed. Otherwise they wouldn't be there. Not only are those in the dock presumed to be guilty, defending barristers are assumed to be only interested in wasting time so that they can share in the rich pickings of the legal aid system, an organization which allows criminal advocates to live almost as high on the hog as well-qualified shorthand typists. For this princely remuneration, members of the jury, we are asked to defend the liberty of the subject, carry on the fine traditions of Magna Carta, make sure that all our citizens are tried by their peers and no man or woman suffers unjust imprisonment, and knock our heads day in and out against the rock-solid wall of the Bullingham factor. For this we have to contend with a judge who invariably briefs himself for the prosecution. During the flow of my oratory I had been conscious of two main events in court. One was the arrival of Detective Inspector Broom, who was in urgent and whispered consultation with Charlie Hearthstoke, and the other was the swelling of the bull like a purple gas balloon which I had been pumping up to bursting point. Now he exploded with a deafening, "Mr. Rumpole!" But before he could deliver the full fury of his judgment against me, Hearthstoke had risen and was saying, "My lord, I wonder if I may intervene, with the greatest respect."
"Oh, certainly, Mr. Hearthstoke."
The judge subsided with a gentle hiss of escaping air.
Certainly you may. Oh, perhaps you have a suggestion to offer on how I might best deal with this outrageous contempt.
I was only about to say, my lord, that what I am going to tell your lordship may make the rest of Mr. Rumpole's opening speech unnecessary.
I have no doubt that all of his opening speech is unnecessary.
Judge Bullingham glared in my general direction. I am informed by Detective Inspector Broom, my lord, that after further inquiries we should no longer proceed on the allegation that either Cyril or Dennis Timpson used or indeed carried the automatic pistol which wounded Mr. Huggins, the bank guard.
Neither of them?
The bull looked as though his constitution might not stand another shock. It seems that further charges will be brought with regard to that offence against another firm, if I may use that expression, Hearthstoke explained. In those circumstances, the only charge is one of theft. Phillida stood up. To which Mr. Cyril Timpson has always been prepared to plead guilty, she admitted charmingly.
Thank you, Mrs. Erskine-Brown,
the judge cooed, and then turned reluctantly to me.
Mr. Rumpole.
Oh, yes, my lord. Guilty to the theft, my lord, with the very greatest respect. I had said most of what I'd always longed to say in Bullingham's court, and my very last case was over. Ferrets! The Malloys said the Timpsons were ferrets. They called it out after your wives in the street. I was in the interview room again with Liz Probert and Mr. Bernard, saying good-bye to our client, Dennis Timpson. I wonder why he used that particular expression. Ferrets are little animals you send down holes in the ground. Of course, the Malloys found out what you were up to. They simply followed you down the burrow. And after you'd got through the wall, what were they going to do? Use the gun to get the money off you and Cyril when you'd opened the safe? Anyway, it all ended in chaos and confusion, as most crimes do, I'm afraid, Dennis. You heard the Malloys and thought they were the old Bill, and ran toward the passage. The Malloys got their hands on the rest of the booty. And then Mr. Huggins, the bank guard, appeared. Some Malloy shot at him and dropped the gun, and they scarpered back down the tunnel, leaving you and Cyril in hopeless ignorance, blaming each other. But there weren't any fingerprints. Liz Probert wondered about my cross-examination of Broom. Oh, no. But the detective inspector told Peanuts Malloy he'd found his, and got him talking. In fact, Peanuts grassed on the rest of the Malloys.
Grassed on his family, did he?
Dennis was shocked. Bastard! I'm afraid things aren't what they were in our world, Dennis. Standards are falling. Now, when you've got this little stretch under your belt, you'd do far better give it all up,
Oh, never.
I'd miss the excitement. You're all right, though, aren't you, Mr. Rumpole? What? I was wondering whether I would miss the excitement, and decided that I could live without the thrills and spills of life with Judge Bullingham. I said, you're all right, Dennis repeated. On the old four-horse accumulator. Oh, yes, Dennis. I think I shall be all right. Thanks entirely to you. I shan't forget it. You were my last case. I stood up and moved toward the door. Give me a ring when you get out, if you're ever passing through Lotus Land. I had looked for Gerald as I arrived down the cells, but the gate had been opened by a thin turnkey without a sandwich. On my way out, I asked for Gerald, anxious to collect my fortune, but was told, "Oh, it's Gerald's day off, Mr. Rumpole. He'll be back tomorrow for sure." Ah, back tomorrow. You don't know the name of his bookmaker by any chance? Oh, no, Mr. Rumpole. Gerald don't take us into his confidence, not as far as that's concerned. Oh, well, all right, I'll be back tomorrow, too. Dennis Timpson well satisfied with his 4 years, was he? The thin warder said as he sprang me from the cells. Yes, he seemed considerably relieved. I don't know how you do it, Mr. Rumpole, honest, I don't. Well, I told him, I'm not going to do it any more. I gave the same news to Henry when I got back to our clerk's room, and he looked unexpectedly despondent. I've done my positively last case, Henry, I told him. I shan't ever be putting my head round the door again asking if you've got a spare committal before the Uxbridge magistrates." "Oh, it's a tragedy, Mr. Rumpole," my former clerk said, and I must say I was touched. A little later he came up to see me in my room and explained the nature of his anxiety. "If you leave, Mr. Rumpole, we're going to have that Mr. Hearthstoke back again. He's going to get your room, sir. Mr. Ballard's already keen on the idea. It'll be a disaster for Chambers, and my 10%. His voice sank to a note of doom, and Diane's threatened to hand in a notice. "I delivered you from Hearthrug once before, Henry," I reminded him of the affair of the massage parlours. "You did, Mr. Rumpole, and I shall always thank you for it. But he's due back here at 5 o'clock, sir, for an appointment with Mr. Ballard. I think they're going to fix up the final details." Well, why should I have cared? By tomorrow, after a brief bit of business with Gerald and a word in the ear of my man of affairs at the Caring Bank, I would be well shot of the whole pack of them. And yet, just as a colonial administrator likes to leave his statue in a public park, or a university head might donate a stained-glass window to the chapel, I felt I might give something to my old Chambers by which I would always be remembered. My gift to the dear old place would be the complete absence of hearthrug. "Ah, 5 o'clock, eh?" I said. "Courage, Henry. We'll see what we can do." Henry left me with every expression of confidence and gratitude, and at 5 o'clock precisely I happened to be down in our entrance hall when Hearthstoke arrived to squeeze Ballard and re-enter Equity Court. "Well, Hearthrug," I greeted him. "Good win, that. Excellent win." Who won?" He sounded doubtful. "Well, you did, of course." "Well, you were prosecuting. We pleaded guilty, and you secured a conviction. Brilliant work. So you're going to have my old room in Chambers. You are leaving, aren't you?" He seemed to need reassurance. "Oh, yes, of course. Off to Lotus Land. In fact, I only called in to pack up a few things." I started up the stairs toward my room, calling to him over my shoulder. "Oh, your life's going to change too, I imagine. Have you had much experience as a father?" "A father? No, none at all." "Oh, pity. Oh, well, I expect you'll pick it up as you go along. That's the way you've picked up most things." I legged it up to the room then, and had the satisfaction of knowing that he was in hot pursuit. Once in my sanctum, he closed the door and said, "Now, Rumpole, suppose you tell me exactly what you mean." "Well, I mean it's clear to all concerned that you've fallen for Mrs. Erskine Brown, hook, line, and probably sinker. When you move into Chambers, she'll be expecting to move into your bachelor pad in Battersea, bringing her children with her. Pooh, jolly brave of you to take her on, as well as little Tristan and Isolde." "Her children," he repeated, dazed. The man was clearly in a state of shock. "Oh, I suppose Claude'll be round to take the kids off to the odd Wagner occasionally. They'll probably come back whistling all the tunes." There was a long pause, during which Hearthrug considered his position. Finally he said, "Perhaps, all things considered, these Chambers might not be just what I'm looking for." "Why don't you slip next door, old darling?" I suggested, "and tell Ballard exactly that." I must now tell you something which is entirely to the credit of Mrs. Phillida Erskine Brown. She was determined, once the case was over, to save the neck of her old friend and one-time mentor, Horace Rumpole, despite the fact that she had only recently been merrily engaged in cutting his throat. She had no idea of my stunning success with the horses, So she took it upon herself to call on the bull in his room, just as he was changing his jacket and about to set off for Wimbledon to terrorize his immediate family. When she was announced by Shrimpton, the court clerk, the learned judge brushed his eyebrows, shot his cuffs, and generally tried vainly to make himself look a little more appetizing. When Phillida entered and was left alone in the presence, an extraordinary scene transpired, the details of which our Portia only told me long after this narrative comes to an end. The no doubt ogling judge told her that her conduct of the defence had filled him with admiration, and added,
"I'm afraid I can't say the same for Rumpole. In fact, I shall have to report him for gross professional misconduct."
And the old hypocrite added,
"After such a long career, too, it's a tragedy, of course."
"A tragedy he was interrupted," Phillida told him. She clearly had the judge puzzled, so she pressed on. "I read the second half of that speech, Judge. Rumpole was extremely flattering, but I think the things he said about you were no less than the truth."
"Flattering?"
The judge couldn't believe his ears. "Yes, as I remember, he said, one of the fairest and most compassionate judges ever to have sat in the Old Bailey, and, combines the wisdom of Solomon with the humanity of Florence Nightingale." And that's only a couple of quotations from the rest of his speech.
But that's not how he started off.
Oh, he was describing the sort of mistaken view the jury might have of an Old Bailey judge. Then he was about to put them right. But, of course, the case collapsed, and he never gave the rest of that marvelous speech.
Florence Nightingale, Can you tell me anything else?
The bull was anxious to know.
That Rumpole was about to say?
"With Judge Bullingham, the quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven." Rather well put, I thought. Will you still be reporting Rumpole for professional misconduct?" The bull was silent then and appeared to reserve judgment.
"I shall have to reconsider the matter," he said, "in the light of what you've told me, Mrs. Erskine-Brown."
And then he approached her more intimately.
"Phillida, may I ask you one question?"
"Oh, certainly, Judge," our Portia answered with considerable courage, and the smitten bull asked,
"Do you prefer the hard or the creamy centers when it comes to a box of chocolate?"
After this strange and in many ways heroic encounter, Phillida turned up in due course at Pomeroy's wine bar and sat at the table in the corner where she had formerly been drinking with Hearthrug. She was there by appointment, but she didn't expect to meet me. I spotted her as soon as I came in, indulging myself with a 4-quid Havana, fresh from my encounter with the young man concerned, and determined to celebrate my amazing good fortune in an appropriate manner. I sat down beside her, and if she was disappointed that it was not someone else, she greeted me with moderate hospitality. "Oh, Rumpole, have a choc." I saw at once that she had a somewhat ornate box on the table in front of her. I was rash enough to take one with a mauve centre. "Bullingham gave them to me," she explained. "The mad bull's in love! Oh, you're a femme fatale, Portia." "Well, don't ask me to explain yet. I'm not sure how it'll turn out," she warned me. "But I went to see him entirely in your interests." "And I've just been seeing someone entirely in yours. What are you doing here anyway, alone and palely loitering?" "Oh, I was just waiting for someone. Phillida was non-committal. "He's not coming." I was certain. "What?" "Hearthrug's not coming. He's not coming into chambers either." She looked at me, puzzled and not a little hurt. "Why not?" "Henry doesn't want him." "Rumpole, what have you done?" She suspected I'd been up to something. "Sorry, Portia. I told him you wanted to move into his bachelor pad in Battersea and bring Kristen and Isolde with you. I'm afraid he went deathly pale and decided to cancel his subscription." There was a longish silence. I didn't know whether to expect tears, abuse, or a quick dash out into the street. I was surprised when at long last she gave me a curious little half-smile and said, "The rat." "I could have told you that before you started spooning with him all round the Old Bailey," I assured her, and added, "Oh, of course I shouldn't have done that." "No, you shouldn't. You'd got no right to say any such thing." "Well, it was Henry and Diane I was thinking about." "Oh, thank you very much. They don't deserve Hearthrug. None of you deserve him." She sighed. "I was only considering a small adventure." She began to explain herself a little sadly, but it was no time for regrets. "Cheer up, Portia," I told her. "In all the circumstances, I think this is the moment for me to buy the Dom Perignon. Méthode champenoise is a thing of the past." She agreed. I went over to the bar where Jack Pomeroy was dealing with the arrival of the usual evening crowd. "A bottle of your best bubbles, Jack." I placed a lavish order. Nothing less than the dear old Dom to meet this occasion. And whilst he went about fulfilling it, I saw Erskine Brown come in and look around the room. "Ah, Claude," I called to him. "I'm in the chair. Care for a glass of vintage bubbly?" There you are," he said, stating the obvious, I thought. I took a telephone message for you in the clerk's room. If it's about a murder tomorrow, I'm not interested. My murdering days were over. No, this was rather a strange-sounding chap. I wouldn't have thought he was completely sober. Said his name was Gerald." "Gerald!" I was pleased to hear it. "Yes, of course, Gerald. He said he was calling from London Airport." "From where?" He said, would I give his thanks to Mr. Rumpole for the excellent tips, and he was just boarding a plane for a warmer climate." Gerald said that. I have had some experience of human perfidy, but I must say I was shocked, and not to put too fine a point on it, stricken. "Oh, words to that effect. Oh, then he said he had to go. They were calling his flight." What do you do if your hopes, built up so bravely through the testing time of a 4-horse accumulator, are dashed to the ground? What do you do if the doors to a golden future are suddenly slammed in your face and you're told to go home quietly? I called for Jack Pomeroy and told him to forget the Dom Perignon and pour out 3 small glasses at the Chateau Thames embankment. Then I looked at Phillida sitting alone, and from her to Erskine Brown. "Claude," I told him, "I have an idea. I think there's something you should do urgently." "Oh, really? What's that, Rumpole?" "For God's sake, take your wife to the opera." During the course of these memoirs, I have stressed my article of faith: never plead guilty. Like all good rules, this is, of course, subject to exceptions. For example, readers will have noticed that having got Dennis Timpson off the firearm charges, I had no alternative but to plead guilty to the theft. So it was with my situation before she who must be obeyed. I knew that she would soon learn of my announced retirement from the bar. If I wished to avoid prolonged questioning on this subject, no doubt stretching over several months, I had no alternative but to come clean and throw myself on the mercy of the court. And so that night, before the domestic gas fire, I gave Hilda a full account of the wager I had placed with Gerald, and of that fat screw's appalling treachery.
"But, Rumpole," she asked,
and it was by no means a bad question,
"do you mean to say you got no record of the transaction?"
Nothing, I had to admit. Not even a betting slip. I trusted him. So bloody innocent. We look after our clients and we're complete fools about ourselves.
"You mean,"
and I could see that things weren't going to be easy,
"you lost my £100?
I'm afraid it's on its way to a warmer climate with about 300,000 friends.
The £100 I spent on the new hearthrug?"
She was appalled. Oh, that £100 is still in the account of the caring bank, Hilda. Coloured red, I tried to explain.
"You'll have to go and talk to Mr. Truscott about it,"
she made the order.
"I don't suppose he'll be inviting you to the Savoy Grill now, Rumpole."
"No, Hilda, I don't suppose he will." I got up then to recharge our glasses, and after a thoughtful sip, Hilda spoke more reasonably.
"I'm not at all sure," she told me, "that I ever wanted to sit with you on a hotel veranda all day drinking Planters Punch, Rumpole."
"Oh, well, perhaps not."
"We might have run out of conversation."
"Yes, I suppose we might." She had another sip or two, and then, much to my relief, came out with,
"Oh, so things could be worse."
"They are." I had to break it to her.
"What?"
"They are worse, Hilda."
"What have you done now?"
"Oh, only promised Detective Inspector Broom that I'd done my last case. Oh, and told the jury exactly what I thought of the mad bull in open court. I'll probably be reported to the Bar Council for disciplinary action to be considered."
"Rumpole!"
Of course she was shocked.
"Daddy would be ashamed of you."
"Oh, that's one comfort."
"What did you say?"
"Your daddy, Hilda, has already been called to account by the great benchers of the sky. I hope he was able to explain his hopeless ignorance of bloodstains." There was a long silence, and then she said,
"Rumpole?"
"Yes?"
"What are you going to be doing tomorrow?"
"Tomorrow?"
"I mean," and Hilda made this clear to me, "I hope you're not really going to retire or anything. I hope you're not going to be hanging around the flat all day. You will be taking your usual tube, won't you, at 8:45?
To hear is to obey. I lifted my glass of Pomeroy's Ordinary to the light, squinted at it, and noted its somewhat murky appearance. "Courage," he said, and pointed towards the Temple Tube Station. So it came about that at my usual hour next morning I opened the door of our clerk's room. Henry was telephoning, Diane was brightening up her nails, and Uncle Tom was practicing chip shots into the waste paper basket. Nothing had changed, and nobody seemed particularly surprised to see me. Henry," I said when our clerk put down the telephone. Yes, Mr. Rumpole." Any chance of a small brief going today? Perhaps a spot of indecency at the Uxbridge Magistrates' Court?